Hey guys, this is Kevin Potter at Potter USA, and I'm going to show you guys how to use these silver stampings. The original design came from this die here. These are actually called hubs. It's not really called a die, it's called a hub. And this hub was made in Paris, France, probably from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And what makes these really amazing is you have to remember at that time there wasn't electricity. So they didn't have a graver or a flex shaft. They didn't have compressed gas in a torch. They had hammers and chisels. And this entire die was carved by hand. And it probably took a huge amount of time. Back then you couldn't just go to the steel store like I do today and just buy a piece of round bar stock in high grade tool steel. That wasn't possible. What you had to do was gather the steel and refine it to actually get steel, because what they had back then was wrought iron. This piece of tool steel was worth more than the wages of the guy who carved this die. He literally chipped all this steel away by hand after the blacksmith had formed this block of steel. And they would have chipped away this entire surface until they had a die. And they didn't have an electric furnace to heat treat these in. So these were heat treated in a coal forge. And you can see the way the coal burns the surface of the die. And then once it's heat treated, they had to come back in and polish this. And they didn't have an electric buffer, so this was all done by hand. So this represents an insane amount of human effort. So what I did was I took this die, or this hub, and I made a die with it. And from this beautiful piece of work comes this. And what this does, this is a female die. It's an exact copy of this, but in the negative. This is never used again. This is set aside and kept safe. And with this, I'm able to make these silver stampings. I can't be producing these dies for you. It's too risky to be pushing those kind of, something that old over and over and over. It's just too much of a risk. When I ship these to you, they're fully hard. So that's nice for sawing into. Just saw it as close to the edges as you can. I would be surprised if there's probably very few of these pieces that were made with this die even in existence, because every time the price of gold or platinum fluctuates, there is basically a massacre that happens of all the beautiful pieces that were made. Unless they're absolutely amazing, they end up getting scrapped. And what mostly survives is costume jewelry, because it's not worth melting. You don't want the back of this thing looking like a stamping. That's wrong. You need to put a back on it. So, this is my very first shear I ever built. Now they look a little bit different. We have a bunch on the shelf over there. There we go. So, once you've cut off your piece of silver for your back, you're going to take it over back to the bench, and we're going to anneal it. And we're going to flatten everything out. You start in the middle of your sheet with a leather mallet. Not on the outside, you start in the middle. Because what you're going to do, you're going to flow the metal out. Flip it. What I like to do before I solder this is make sure that my silver is very clean. Because I always hear about people not being able to get their solder to flow. Well, it won't flow if your metal's dirty. If it has oxidation on it, you're going to have troubles. So I'm going to get the back of this They both have to be clean. This is a truly elegant way of making jewelry. So I'm going to put a little flux on both sides. I'm going to use hard solder. I'm going to grab a bunch of little pieces off. Now I turn my lights out, not because I like soldering in the dark, but because I want to be able to see if I'm getting too hot. I'm going to grab some flux. I'm going to pick it with a solder pick. I'm going to heat my silver. More solder. Try to keep your solder pick cold so that your solder sticks to it. See how the solder just kind of wicks right up to the sides? Be careful not to overheat your piece, because you can definitely cook it, and try not to get solder on it. We're going to use this as our guide, and we're going to cut all the way around. So here we go again. Once you have your piece all cut out, then you're going to make sure it has no gaps around it, and mine looks pretty good. And what you're going to do is you'll finish filing it and get everything just perfect. Now if you're a total masochist, you could pierce the entire interior of this out. I wouldn't. I like it just the way it is. I like it when it's blackened. It'll look really nice. But I am going to pierce out up here by the swan's necks. And I think I'm going to make some little pearl drops to hang off of this. But what it'll have, we'll have a handmade chain. So I'm going to show you how to make a handmade chain. So that, because a store-bought chain is just going to look wrong with this. You're going to have to make one. But we're going to do another video next week, and we'll complete the piece. And we'll even make our clasp as well. So we'll have the entire process. Thanks for watching.